Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday and happy holidays to everyone. I'll give everyone a minute to join before we get started here. All right. Seeing that it's 10 o'clock, we'll get started as people join. My name is Kara Heifel. I'm with the Illinois Restaurant Association, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Today's webinar is called Be Ready, Regulatory Changes Affecting Restaurants in 2023. We'll cover what's happened in the regulatory space federally and at the state level in 2022 and what to look out for that will affect your business in 2023. During today's webinar, we'll hear from experts at the National Restaurant Association. We also have our president and CEO, Sam Toia, here, and we have our lobbyist in Springfield for the IRA as well. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that the Illinois Restaurant Association remains a resource for you and your business for any regulatory questions you have, licensing, any assistance that you have that you need or guidance as we continue to recover and hope to build back stronger for the entire industry. Our staff, myself here, and everyone at the IRA and the NRA is here to help you, and anything that you need, we are happy to advocate for or answer any questions. For today's webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to use that chat button at the bottom toolbar and type in your questions, and we will do our best to get all the questions answered at the end. And if you like a certain question, feel free to give it a thumbs up so we can make sure to get to the ones if we run out of time. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have Sam Toia, our fearless leader, president and CEO at the IRA. We have Aaron Frazier, who's the vice president of public policy at the National Restaurant Association, as well as Michael Ambrose, who manages states and local policy at the National Restaurant Association and is our point person here in Illinois. And we also have Derek Blada, who is our IRA lobbyist in Springfield and just a general guru of all state politics things. And now, without further ado, let's get started, and I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much to Sam and the entire Illinois Restaurant Association team. Truly, Illinois restaurants are probably the best in the country. I'll say it. I'm a Maryland resident. I'll still say it in front of Maryland as well. Not only in Chicago, but in Skokie, Springfield, Champaign. Truly, it's an honor to work on behalf of Illinois restaurants, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about regulatory trends, and more importantly, answering that first question: why are we talking about regulatory trends rather than the other half of the equation, legislative stuff? Well, it's because we had a big election, and change of power in DC means more reasons for inertia on some level in that beautiful building right there that sits in the middle of Washington, DC. But it moves a little bit up Pennsylvania Avenue over to the White House and the entire regulatory apparatus of the federal government that is sure to have fun rules, rulemakings, regulations that are going to make it a little bit harder to operate in 2023 and 2024. But we do think there are some big opportunities for us to collaborate on and partner with. And we'll talk about those. And of course, state and local is never going away. If anything, as the election has showed us, that while divided government in Washington might improve the likelihood of regulations to come out, in the state house and at the local level, having a bluer legislative body or regulatory body is also going to have some very interesting threats and opportunities as well. So with that, let's do a quick snapshot of the elections. And I know we're a couple of days before Christmas. We're in the middle of Hanukkah. So we want to keep it a little bit light, but we'll do a quick drive-by of what happened just last month. The House was expected to see a quote-unquote red wave. People were, as only Washington can do, doing, do they pick up 20 seats, 30 seats, 40 seats? How do you handicap it and put it on DraftKings? Well, if you took the under on what the House would flip with and what the House would look like in terms of Republican representation in 2023, you would have won. They picked up what some are calling a meager 8 seats in the House. That was the red wave is more of a red trickle. I remember when redistricting, that fancy process where all the states redraw their lines and put certain voting neighborhoods and other voting precincts. They said, well, redistricting alone will flip the House. And it looks like that's kind of what did it. A combination of an improving economy, like the economy wasn't as bad as some people thought, COVID generally being on the downslope in this past 6 to 12 months, certainly the regulations and the rules largely going away, and then things that really spiked interest in the independents and Democrats, such as the Dobbs decision. And I think what was on the ballot was also election denialism and saying like these elections aren't totally accurate and they actually are not to be relied on. Guess turns out people don't go out to vote if they don't think their vote's going to matter. So we saw that, in a lot of areas, especially I think very in a surprising way in the Senate, actually gaining a seat. That was surprising because there were big pickup opportunities for Republicans in Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Very big pickup opportunities. They did not win a single one of them. Raphael Warnock won twice in 2 months. So it was really interesting to see some of those elections take place in the Senate. And then, of course, governors added two to their column. So you're going to have another trifecta. And that means it's totally blue state, but really the red wave just did not materialize. And I think in some ways, if you're doing the quick snap autopsy in the next slide, you can start to unpack what happened. A lot of these new candidates that were christened in this race were pretty inexperienced, and they haven't always done the best when they are inexperienced. In 2010, Christine O'Donnell won a Republican primary in a Tea Party wave year, but she couldn't get away from allegations that she was a witch. She ran a campaign ad that led with "I'm not a witch," and this was a very winnable seat. She lost. Roy Moore ran an Alabama special and took out a handgun on stage when he was talking about the Second Amendment, which was unusual, but might have helped him. You never know. But he also had a reputation of prowling around shopping malls looking for young people. So not the best reputation in a right of center state. He lost to a Democrat in Alabama. And we saw Herschel Walker, Blake Masters, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, and General John Bullock in New Hampshire. These are all people that on paper you might say, I could see them being in a position of leadership and the outsider credentials, maybe a Heisman Trophy winner, a general, a TV doctor. There might be a good opportunity for these folks to be in leadership. But unfortunately, a series of missteps really did cost them a huge wave in the Senate. And again, in very traditionally winnable races when the economy is below average and the president, the top Democrat at the top of the ticket, who wasn't on the ballot, had a less than great approval rating. On the next slide, you can see some of the Republicans that might have won and generally would run for reelection, would run for these open Senate seats, but they chose no. I'm going to stay in the governor's mansion. I'm going to run a state rather than be one of 100 in Washington, D.C. And in my home state, almost as blue as Illinois, Larry Hogan won with 55% of the vote in 2018 with a very unpopular top of the ticket, low approval rating Republican president. In Georgia and New Hampshire and Arizona, a lot of these folks would have probably won their Senate seats if they ran. That's just a fact, because they have a unique combination of traditional Republicans, traditional right of center, and a lot of those independents who want to see someone who cares about their state, who cares about the issues, and isn't going to, is not going to be the proverbial crazy uncle at the holiday dining table and say crazy things that makes people a little bit scared. These are a lot more safer. Even I realize the irony with Brian Kemp holding a rifle, but these are traditionally the safer type of candidates that can see electoral success and make gains for their own party in a midterm election. In the next slide, I think you can start to see what our plan of attack is for this Congress. There's a lot that we think we need to do, and it's the foundation of the pyramid. It's education. 90% of what I do as a public policy person, or what traditional lobbyists do, is education. If you look at the incoming House GOP, most of them have never been in the majority. They don't know what to do with a gavel besides bang it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know how to control power, advance legislation, accept amendments, and say, well, okay, restaurants, we left 2 out of 3 Illinois restaurants out of things like RRF, those RRF awards. What do we do for those 2 out of 3? Do we look at their economic injury disaster loans? Do we look at a tax credit? How do we improve ERTC? How do we go to the IRS and say, we need to fix how we do these employee retention credits so that the delay never happens of 6, 12, 18 months? They don't know how to do that yet because they've never been in power. They've never sent a letter to a federal agency that's going to go to the top of the pile. They've never introduced legislation that says, I'm going to defund your department if you don't fix some of these actions that this federal agency is doing. We need to help them. Even with Senate Democrats, there are a lot of new Senate Democrats there that were either freshmen or came in 2016 to 2022. So that's about almost 1 out of 3 Senate Democrats. More than that amount, about 2 out of 5 Senate Republicans. So education is going to be key. Michelle Korsmo, my boss's boss, said that you need to start getting to these folks before they not only get their committee assignments, but before they get sworn in, because they don't know what they're doing yet, but by the time they get sworn in, they think they do. So it's a very key time period right now to start reaching out to lawmakers in Q1 of 2023. Sam, I saw you jump on. Do you have anything? Did you want to add to that? Okay.
All good.
Okay. Education is what we do first and foremost. Everything else comes after that. Next slide. Because when we start with the education, we lead with the issues. We lead with, this is a fix that needs to be done. Chances are bipartisanship does fall into place. And even in a divided Congress, even with both sides of the aisle having a sense of mistrust of tactics, strategy, and overall, like, do we have our similar interests in mind when we take that oath of office? There's still a lot of things that can get done. The Senate vote in that third column there, it just screams bipartisanship. And even in the era of big spending or China or guns, these hot button issues, there are still areas where we can find middle ground. Next slide. Okay, so on the federal front burner, we'll go right to the next one. As I mentioned, with Congress being divided, we have to be really, really focused and very targeted to what we're pursuing. The first thing we want to do is really address how do we lower the cost of doing business and start to unwind things like the trade wars? How do we improve food pricing? And let me stop right there. One of the things that Congress does best is work on a deadline, get it done before deadline. It's like a 12-year-old that has a homework due at a certain time period. You'll get really motivated the last day. That's kind of how Congress works. Candidly, that's happening this week. Congress is trying to pass something called an omnibus legislation to fund the government. And it's called omni, meaning all. Put it all on this one big sheet of paper so we can fund the federal government and get out of DC back home before Christmas Eve. And there's also, for the Department of Metaphors, there's a big storm coming across the Midwest, and it's going to hit the East Coast on Thursday. So they're trying to get out before that. Just to let you know how things actually work. They call it jet fumes when lawmakers want to get out of town. Well, the jet fumes is going to happen at the end of 2023, where Congress has to reauthorize something called the Farm Bill. This is a series of insurance protections for farmers, pricing incentives, and how we kind of fund the agricultural supply chain to bring food and beverage safely to end users. So one of our big priorities is saying, hey, year over year, food prices have skyrocketed. There are shortages, supply concerns, avian flu. We need to have a comprehensive strategy around reducing or stemming the rise of food prices. So that's a major concern, and that's something we're going to be in touch with a lot, because we think when the farm bill is reauthorized by the end of 2023, there needs to be significant protections for food pricing over the next 5 years. And that's generally the calendar that they do it. They set it every 5 years. Another issue that we want to work on is unwinding the trade wars, which we think just unnecessarily raises the cost of things like aluminum that are all over a kitchen. And then there are all these reciprocal tariffs that we see in our linens, that we see in some food categories, that we see in some furniture products. So unwinding the trade wars is something that is remarkably bipartisan about the Trump administration and the Biden administration. Is that the Trump administration started it, and the Biden administration has taken kind of a very piecemeal approach around it. But we think there's opportunity to really comprehensively say, no, either we're about free and fair trade or we're not. And we think the trade wars have a lot to do with it. Then we've made a play on credit card swipe fees at the end of year legislation. We want to make sure that data privacy legislation doesn't actually affect customer loyalty programs. And then for bigger companies, we want to make sure that the SEC doesn't legislate as an independent agency and doesn't have new rules on climate disclosure or cybersecurity attacks that are generally going to affect the publicly traded companies. The second biggest tranche on the next slide, the second biggest tranche of our priorities are rebuilding the restaurant workforce. Restaurants are still, that may not be a current statistic, but we're right around 550,000 employees below pre-pandemic levels. So we're still over 500,000 employees off from where we were in 2019. That goes a lot of different directions, right? That goes into hiring, that goes into third-party delivery. Restaurants are maybe getting smaller or utilizing different spaces so that they don't have to hire the same amount of people. But we want to make sure that it's not the tail wagging the dog, and that when we can find people for seasonal towns, for college towns, for big cities and small towns, we can find people. And we think that the foreign worker visa program can be dramatically improved by establishing an H-2C visa. This has to be done in legislation, but we know that there's a lot of interest in it. Just last week, we had Senator Kyrsten Sinema and Senator Thom Tillis pursue a bipartisan legislation to address Dreamers. Now, that is one of the most hot button issues you can have in Washington, D.C. is how do you create a pathway for citizenship? That's a non-starter for a lot of people, but actually helping the Dreamers, the DACA recipients, deferred action, the people that were brought here very young, and they are not citizens, but their paperwork, their immigration status is very undetermined. So we think there's a combination of things that we can do to improve the workforce. This is going to have a big hill to climb in this Congress, but we're trying to pursue every available venue. If you can get Senator Thom Tillis from North Carolina and Senator Sinema from Arizona, both saying that we need to improve the work visa situation in this country, we think there's a real opportunity there. Next slide. Okay, so state challenges. I live in Maryland, but I'm originally from California. I think it's one of the most beautiful state houses, and that's prominently displayed here. A beautiful building where really awful stuff comes out of. So I'll say that candidly. And then the next slide, we'll start to get into some of that. But the first thing is the tip credit. We are still pursuing this in every jurisdiction, every state. We suffered a loss in Washington, D.C., but in some way it was a stay of execution for about 5 years. Since 2018, we've been working on this, and unfortunately we lost in this last election. But in places like Portland, Maine, they still voting to preserve the tip credit. Obviously, this is a huge deal. The elimination of the tip credit is still going to be introduced in early 2023. It's still a priority of a lot of people who are now going to be in the minority in the House of Representatives, and it's something that we stay on vigilantly. Next slide. So then we want to go into the Fast Recovery Act, or the FAST Act. Now let me start by saying people smarter about Illinois than me are saying this is very unlikely to go forward in Illinois or in any cities because savvy operators going back to pre-Civil War era say, why would I put an unelected body and give them power in how they set workforce and wage standards rather than me as a legislator, as a lawmaker, do it myself? California is going to do what California does because it's big, ungovernable, and the sixth biggest economy in the world. And they're kind of on their own little island out there on the West Coast. People that have been running government for generations don't give away power. That's not what they do. They know they accumulate power. So with that having said that, we are vigilantly watching what a lot of the leading labor unions like the SEIU are saying. And they're saying we want to go to West Coast states, we want to go to a couple of East Coast states, and then they've targeted different areas in the Midwest as well. So we have to be vigilant. What the Fast Recovery Act does or is doing in California is establishing an unelected, largely just appointed 10-member industry sector council, very European style regulatory body that can set standards on wages, working conditions, go all the way up to $22 an hour for minimum wage, and set new standards. And labor unions are sitting at the table right with restaurants. And it's essentially one big, in my perspective, it's one big organizing body where they're organizing bigger restaurants that have a franchisee footprint in the state of California. Next slide. It covers a fast food chain, fast food restaurants. So generally it's going to be, there's a standard of how they do it. It's not going to affect your family style or full service restaurant, but it's generally targeting a fast food chain restaurant consisting of 100 or more establishments. And some of the definitions are probably what you would expect. Michael, is there anything you would add in terms of like what the umbrella of the FAST Act would cover in terms of if you're on this webinar right now and you have 7 coffee chain restaurants in the greater downstate area, should you be concerned? How would you be concerned?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely something that anybody who's franchised should be concerned about. Like Aaron said, the unions are planning to expand this to as many markets as they can. It's not going to look exactly like what California passed. The state and local governments may not give up as much authority as they did with the FAST Act, but some form of it is going to be a major threat in a number of places across the country. And right now, California was the first place to pass it. They absolutely want to expand applicability. Like eventually, it's going to go from franchises with 100 locations down to 50, down to 10. Like they want to capture as many people ultimately as they can through this. So definitely something to be on your radar, and so something that we are keeping a very close eye on.
Yeah, and thank you, Michael. I think if you're sitting at SEIU headquarters and you're talking with the incoming Senate Health Chairman who oversees labor policy in this country, his name is Bernie Sanders. And he's going to be saying what the SEIU is saying in terms of where do we want to organize? Where do we want to bring the FAST Act next? How can the federal government help? And then the person that signed the FAST Act into law, Governor Gavin Newsom, his department said, you know what, guys, this is a bad idea. They put out a fiscal statement, fancy word of saying this is not going to do for us revenue wise. It's not that good of a deal to have the FAST Act and to essentially organize this entire industry as if it's a European style body. But then he saw the politics rolling out over last summer. He saw a lot of restaurants being concerned, but he heard a lot of labor folks say this is our priority for Sacramento. And come Labor Day, he was taking a little hike through a vineyard and did a video saying, I'm so happy. We workers of the world unite, and I'm signing the FAST Act into law. So now Governor Gavin Newsom sets a line for a lot of other ambitious governors and politicians and saying, this is a big priority for labor. So now,
Aaron, it's worth noting that we beat this in California last year. There was a floor vote. Labor thought that they were going to be able to pass it, and we stopped them. So in the time between, since last year, that they went to, every Dem who had a relationship with the unions and made clear, like, you will not get our support. We will actively primary you if you don't vote for this. So a lot of members who may be moderates, who may understand that this would impact the business community in a negative way, are still going to end up voting for it when they feel that kind of pressure from the unions.
Right. Let's go to the next slide. So as Michael mentioned, what was the original form? But keep in mind, we didn't take a bad song and make it better. We took a bad song and made it slightly less bad. So it targeted the smaller restaurant chains with 30 or more locations. So that could affect something like, it could affect a Lazy Dog restaurant, which is a small chain restaurant based in California, and they bumped it up from 30 to 100. In the next slide, you can see some of the improvements. No, I'm sorry, not the improvements, but basically the referendum that we're in pursuit of right now, and I'm going to be a little careful with my words because there are a lot of legal implications here, but it's a stay. It's a stay of execution. The referendum is going to be in the ballot. It's extremely intensive to do. And even if we're successful, it's a delay, right? It's still going to get on the ballot to November 2024. That's a presidential election year where a lot of blue voters come out who may have skipped the 2022 election. But to wage a multi-million-dollar campaign, you have to look at something what Lyft and Uber have done in California in terms of their independent contractor rule. So we're thinking, well, can we get on the ballot? And we are going to get on the ballot. The second step is, how do you win an election statewide? Uber and Lyft did it, and they allegedly had almost $1 billion campaign to do it. I don't think that this is a $1 billion play for most restaurants. I think this is a little bit of a delay, but it's very interesting to see what the contours of that discussion would look like, how restaurants engage in that discussion, and how even something like a two-year delay is worth a lot of effort and education. Next slide. So this is generally what we're doing. It's a lot of coordination with SRAs, local franchisees, independents. It's a lot of the message of saying, well, if you're a franchisee, if you're a quick service restaurant, you're a fast food restaurant, and now you must pay $22, $23 an hour, and you're in a small to medium-sized market. How am I, if I open up Aaron's Eatery or a Pancake House, and I say, okay, I'm going to hire someone, I think I can pay them $16 an hour, and I should be able to build the entry-level employment that way. How am I ever going to compete with that QSR, that quick service chain that's paying $23 an hour already? It creates a tremendous gulf in who you can access for employment. And we want to make sure that message gets out there too. How does this affect the smaller business out there who now has to compete with kind of a behemoth? Next slide. So Illinois has been called out as a potential FAST Act state. It's also, as we know, we're always going to have to defend the tip credit. We mentioned that. So those blue states there are under discussion for both tip credit and FAST Act. So that's a double whammy. And then the red states there are just the FAST Act. But of course, state and local policy issues, they never go away. Things like blood alcohol levels are still out there. We're making sure that education is available for that. Children's meal beverage legislation in terms of what can you put on the menu for a kid's menu, it's always there. But the new issues are forming very quickly. How do we avoid new taxes? A lot of states are generally a little more flush. They still have a lot of that pandemic money, but we know a lot of them have spent it or they've committed it elsewhere. So that means they're going to be looking for new revenue drivers. And of course, the business community is always going to be there with a big target on it. So that's why, again, it's so important to engage with the Illinois Restaurant Association to ensure that you're reading those newsletters when they come out, when you're participating in the polls. All that stuff really, really does matter because it helps us a lot when we do need an all hands on deck moment. All
Thank
right,
you.
now I'll hand it over to Derek.
Thank you, Aaron. Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
No, maybe we should take a few questions for Aaron right now before we do Derek. So people might have questions for the federal level, and then we can do Derek and then get questions on the state level. So if any folks have any questions for Aaron and Michael, why don't we shoot them some questions while it's still fresh on your mind what Aaron just said. It was a great presentation, Aaron. Thank you.
Sure thing. I had some questions come in before this webinar, so I'll just ask them from the audience that told me they couldn't make it. So the Credit Card Competition Act is sponsored by our very own Dick Durbin, as well as he sponsored the Dreamers. What is the status of that, Aaron or Michael?
So we made a play to include the credit cards, and just to back up real quick, we all know that there are two primary credit card carriers in this country, Visa and MasterCard. They're great partners in some ways, but in some ways, they've raised their fees over the past 12 to 18 months. And that is extremely alarming for restaurants, because that's our third biggest cost driver. Number one is generally food and product. Number two is labor. Number three, money going out the door, is for credit cards and for taking these two different companies who just happen to be raising fees at a very similar time period. We shared that concern with Dick Durbin. He was the one that helped us a lot on debit cards to make sure that there's more competition for debit cards. So we said, Senator, similar concept, different card. And he sponsored a new legislation to say, actually, there needs to be more competition. It just can't be these two credit card carriers conveniently raising fees on small businesses at the same time. Let's lower those fees and introduce more competition to the market. We made a play. We did a year end, and a lot of business groups do this, but we made a year end lame duck list for Congress. Hey, you got to do this credit card routing requirement. It's going to lower fees. It's going to help reduce inflation. And we tried to attach it to the big omnibus spending bill that came out this week. It was not included. It was a tough, I'll call it a preemptive L. It was hard to take this tough preemptive L. There's not a lot of prospects on this for next Congress. I'm just going to warn you there. The incoming House Republican Party does not have a lot of interest in sticking a finger in the eye of the financial services companies when they take the gavel. But it's something that we are still going to stay on. Like, we could follow it through a variety of rulemakings and federal efforts. So we're not giving up on it, but we do not expect that the Durbin-Marshall legislation will make it into the year-end bill.
Got it. Thank you. We have another question, Aaron, that just came in. Can you touch again on potential SEC implications for restaurant reporting?
Yeah, so this is SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. Let me just say, generally, it's only going to affect the big publicly traded companies. But the SEC has kind of done a little bit of legislating from the federal government, which you're not really supposed to do. And they've said, okay, when it comes to cybersecurity, a company has to report to its shareholders that it's been attacked and how deeply it was attacked within 24 hours. Well, sometimes it can take a week or two to even know that you got hacked and like what the extent of it was. So how are they going to report on it within 24 hours? Another play that we're doing, or another issue that we're playing on, is the climate reporting rule that was released by the SEC earlier this year. This would require a publicly traded company to report back on all of its greenhouse gas emissions, which generally they could do it. A lot of companies do it in Europe, but the SEC is saying go all the way back, like to the farm, to the cattle, to the grass, to the fertilizer that was used to grow your hamburger for your end user customer, and tell us all about that in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot of franchisees, a lot of farmers and ranchers are saying, we don't know how to report all this stuff back. It's going to raise a lot of liability. It's going to raise a lot of big concerns. So we've advocated with the SEC and with Congress to roll that rule back. We will know more about that by April of this year, of 2023.
Great, thank you. Well, one other quick question before we turn it over is, beyond credit cards, should or can restaurants start to prepare for the new FedNow payment service?
I'm gonna have to learn more about that one before I answer it intelligently. I'm not aware of the FedNow payment service.
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with it, but by no means an expert. Thankfully, we do have on our team a guy who does technology and innovation policy who is more well versed in it and can help with that. But it seems like it's a real time payment collection system that has been tried in a couple states or proposed in a couple places, and it's just not viable. But the Federal Reserve has been pushing for something that just doesn't seem like the technology is really there yet.
Got it. Perfect. And now's a good time to remind everyone that you'll get a recording of this and the slide deck for this, and it will have our contact information on there. So if you have any specific questions like that, we will get back to you about any more questions that we have going on, because we have experts. And that's what we're lucky to have. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to turn it over to Derek Blada now. He is our IRA lobbyist in Springfield and has a wealth of knowledge and experience to update you on. Go ahead, Derek.
So Kara, thank you very much. And I appreciate Aaron and Michael's presentation. So much so, you should ignore my slide. Let me start at the bottom just to dovetail off of the quote unquote double whammy that was just addressed a few minutes ago, tip credit and FAST Act. So here's what we know, at least in Springfield as of right now, ignoring the fact the game for next session doesn't start until Wednesday, January 11th. There will be bills filed on tip credit in the Illinois version of the FAST Act. And early reactions have been severely mixed, particularly on the FAST Act because of what you just heard. Elected officials in Springfield are okay with the general concept of it. But once we start talking about an unelected body who will make decisions on wages and other employment issues, that's where great hesitation has popped up, to the point where when the definition of working conditions has been discussed, obviously not in Springfield, but with organized labor and other interested groups, it has expanded to things like housing subsidies, health insurance, economic development issues, not directly related to the employer whatsoever. And that's where the water gets very, very gray, very, very fast. You will see bills on this in Springfield. I know leadership has heard from us. I know leadership has heard from Sam and others in our industry about this issue, and obviously tip credit over the years. But I guess my message today is twofold. One, there are bills filed on every year, and we continue to address tip credit every year. And leadership has been with us, and they've been strong on it. As it relates to FAST Act, there are individuals who gather in a room today who cannot agree on how many establishments should be covered under their proposals, what working conditions mean or how they shall be defined, what the dollar amount of the wage should be. For those in the Chicago area, you may know there's an endorsement questionnaire for local elections that will happen in February of next year, where a specific question of shall a $25 an hour minimum wage be supported. Next year, January 1st, the minimum wage in Illinois outside of the Chicago metropolitan area will be under $8. It simply does not work. We will continue to meet with leadership, their staffs, individual members for the Chicago metropolitan area, and obviously across the state, and particularly our two new Republican leaders. Illinois, the largest Democratic majority in the state's history, will have 78 Democrats out of 118. The Senate will continue to hold a supermajority of Democrats there as well. Our two new Republican leaders, John Curran from Southwest Cook County, a former assistant state's attorney, very big on crime issues, public safety, obviously because of his background. Jim Durkin will be replaced by Tony McCombie, who comes from Savannah, Illinois. For those unfamiliar with Savannah, it is near the Quad Cities in the northwestern portion of the state. Tony is very upfront, direct. You always know where she stands. Not saying that's not how Jim was, but it's a different style, a welcome addition to Republican leadership on the House side. As tip credit, as FAST Act issues arise, you will obviously be kept updated. But for now, I guess our message is hold on. We will continue to work through them together. And I want to thank Sam, Mary Kay, and Kara, always available to discuss these and other issues that affect us. They've done yeoman's work, preemptive work on these issues. So thank you to them. Taxes will be a familiar subject for us in Springfield next year. Good news and bad news. Good news. Back in March or April, if you were on our previous conference call, you may remember me talking about the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Long story short, and don't want to put anybody to sleep on this issue today. We had to solve for almost a $2 billion deficit in our fund by New Year's Eve, or the federal government could have stepped in and set rates for employers and employees who seek to access dollars within this fund. Working with our partners downstate and throughout the region, there is a very, very good deal that was passed in Springfield that is beneficial to employers. Long story short here, over the next 5 years, employer taxes will be reduced by over $910 million based on the bill that the General Assembly passed and the governor is signed into law. Now, obviously, with any revenue projections, with any economic indicators, they will continue to sway and ebb and flow, and the number will vary over years. But for the next 5 years, small employment taxes as they relate to the Unemployment Trust Fund will fall for employers, particularly in the Chicago metropolitan area. That has led to others saying, wait a minute, taxes have been reduced here on employers. That means there is money available to fund other programs by them. Obviously, we are in opposition to that. We have communicated that and will continue to do so because recovery continues not only in Northeastern Illinois, but particularly in other parts of the state south of I-72, west of 355. We recently met with leadership's offices and their staffs on this particular issue. They are well aware of our concerns. They are well aware this is a hot point issue for our members. In previous meetings, we have discussed the issue of the Criminal Justice Reform Act. And Springfield addressed it during the fall veto session. I just want to take 2 minutes to talk about a few components of the reform bill amendments that were made because other members have raised them on previous calls. There were issues based from gross misinformation because of the election cycle. And whenever you have a 400 or 500 page bill that is considered in a very quick time span, there will obviously be unintended errors, drafting, interpretational, shall instead of may and shall instead. We tried to clean those up in Springfield, but two issues that continue to arise in conference calls that we have had previously is the issue of bail and the issue of the detainment process during the criminal justice system itself. There was one question that I received literally yesterday on carjacking. Under the previous versions of the bill, it could have been interpreted that if you are charged with carjacking or other specific vehicular offenses, you could not be detained by a court of law. You would receive an administrative citation. The bill that we passed in Springfield clears this up. The bill that we passed in Springfield says that if a defendant's release poses a real or true threat to an alleged victim or to the community in which they live, a judge for various reasons can continue to detain that individual through the pre-trial process. I know our former chairman raised this issue back in September. Carjacking was a large part of the discussion in November. There were other issues as it relates to burglary and robbery. Those issues have been tightened up in the Justice Reform Bill as well. There will be a comprehensive summary that will be published by a third-party independent organization when that comes in. Happy to get that to care of for distribution among our members. One last thing that I do want to raise, and it was raised in the federal presentation, Illinois' federal pandemic money. The state of Illinois has been intentionally slow to spend these dollars to have them last for the next 2 years. If I recall, those dollars must be expended in their entirety by 2026. There will likely be federal money that is returned by some recipients because, frankly, they simply can't expend the amount of dollars that they were allocated in previous state fiscal years. When that begins to happen, and frankly, it must happen because some of the requests were simply so large based on requests made to leadership, we're going to make a play for some of those dollars. How large, in what areas, clearly unknown yet because the scope and size of the return funds simply unknown today. We will continue to work with Sam and his team over the next 6 months to begin to identify areas that the legislature may award return funds, for lack of a better term. That's my description of them. When that becomes available, when there's an idea of size and scope, obviously we'll keep you informed on future calls. Kara, I'm happy to stop there and answer any questions. I appreciate the invite to join us today.
Yeah, one thing that I'm hearing overlapping federal and state is how many new members, and after this election, how important it is to educate all the new members. There's never been 78 House Democrats before, and new leadership, and Sam, Mary Kay, and myself will continue, and Derek will continue to educate everyone, and new members in Congress and at the state level. And Sam, did you have any updates on the local level? Because we have, another big election or two coming up.
Well, yeah, let me jump in on that. So obviously we have in the city of Chicago, the municipality elections coming up. We are working with the business PAC that's being headed up by Michael Rumler to try to get more pragmatic city council members elected. We will not know what the new council looks like until after the April election. I think there will be quite a few runoffs. Then we will know what legislation, what ordinances could be coming out of city council. But at this point, I think they will be keeping an eye on, obviously, the tip credit. I don't think they'll touch the FAST Act, but obviously the $25 minimum wage is being put out there a lot by the unions, and that's why we are working with the business PAC, and we're getting a lot of business support on that to try to get elected city council members that understand business issues, that understand that you can't do all the stuff you want to do if you don't have businesses in your city. So we will be working very closely with that, trying to get pragmatic elected officials elected, especially in wards that we think that we should hold as pragmatic elected officials, but we're also going to look at wards where they do have socialists representing them right now, because there is a poll out there that the majority of people don't agree with socialism. And right now we do have 6 socialist aldermen, and they're hoping to, add a few more, which would make it, between the socialists and the progressives, they could become the majority. That's why we're going to stay real close to these elections and make sure that we have a seat at the table with pragmatic elected officials that are business friendly. We'll keep you updated as we move along on the municipality elections.
And I would just add, Sam, that was jarring what I just heard, but in terms of what you're working with, on the federal side, I would say we're not necessarily dealing with as many socialists, but the people that are here haven't done what you've done. Like they haven't done, let's not pretend like we've gone through a normal 2.5 years here. What was it like when you had to tell your team to go home in 2020? What did it feel like to hire people back in 2021 and 2022? And what does it mean when you have 40 people on your payroll, two operations to run, and the bills come in and they get higher and higher, and the margins get fewer and fewer? So there's a really important message we need to drive in this Congress, and it's based on what you have done. And if we don't have that participation, then we can't tell that message. But nothing's going to be stronger than collaborating.
Yep. And I'll just jump in and say that I think we have some great collaboration with our partners at IRA. I manage 20 states. I've worked in all 50, and I can't think of any state association that's as dialed in, but both at the state and local level in terms of their engagement and making sure that they do find pragmatic elected officials to work with. So you're in good hands. We're in constant communication, and I can't play favorites among our state associations, but as a Chicago native, it's nice to know that IRA is out there every day doing great work.
Thank you, Michael. Let me just jump in one more time too. So, and Derek can probably piggyback on this too. Nothing passes in the city council or at the state level without the Black Caucus weighing in, because they're very strong caucuses. It seems that nowadays the Black Caucus have more pragmatic officials within their caucus than the Latino caucus or the Progressive Caucus. We're working closely with the Latino caucus as well. But Jason Irwin, who is the chairman of the Black Caucus in the City Council, we have a very good relationship with. And a few things that we were able to push back on, it was because of the Black Caucus, like Jason Irwin and Michelle Harris, leaders within the Black Caucus that have helped us very much. So we do work really close with the Black Caucus, both in the City Council and in Springfield. Derek, would you agree with me that it's very important that we keep our relationship strong with the Black Caucus, and they are basically a lot of pragmatic elected officials within those caucus? Did we lose you, Derek? I think you're on mute, Derek.
Sam, I'm sorry, I'm having internet problems. I heard about half of your question.
All right. So what I was saying is that both at the City Council and at the state level, nothing really passes unless the Black Caucus signs on. We work very closely with both the Black Caucus here in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. Would you agree with me that there's probably more pragmatic elected officials within the Black Caucus, and we do have a good rapport with them, and they do seem to understand some of our issues?
The answer is yes. I apologize. I heard none of your lead up to your ultimate question, but I know the Black Caucus has supported us time and time again in Springfield, particularly obviously in the House and the Senate. There is a clear understanding that if you don't have viable businesses, you don't have viable employers. And the link between success in one's community stems from a thriving economic employer base. I know in the past 3 months, members of the caucus and the House and Senate side have reached out to us on issues they are thinking about for 2023 on whether or not we would support or oppose them, because they are very cognizant that it is still a very uncertain time throughout the state for many of our members who continue pandemic recovery. The answer to your question is yes. And clearly not looking to embarrass you, Sam, but I do know they appreciate you being involved directly. There's not an issue on which you won't jump on the phone or a conference call to speak on behalf of the members. And I want them to know that today. So I'm appreciative of it. I apologize for, yeah.
Thank you. And I just basically too, we work very closely, as I call them, the women on the lakefront too, such as Senator Feigenholz and Representative Ann Williams, Representative Kelly Cassidy. So we do have a game plan in Springfield working with the women on the lakefront, at Black Caucus, some of the Latino caucus, because we're well aware that the supermajority Democrats are really control things. You know what I mean? Obviously, we do talk with the Republicans, but the Democrats can let literally 18 people walk and still pass a bill. Is that right, Derek?
That's exactly
right. I just want our
I definitely heard that
members
exactly
know. Right. Yeah, that our members know we need to really work, especially in a blue states, with these different caucuses. And we have, and you got to make friends before you need them. And that's what we've done with some of these caucuses by backing bills that they, really wanted us on board, before, like the cannabis bill or the marriage bill. We have worked with them on that, and they are very happy about that. So we have been playing the long game in Springfield for quite a while now.
And further to Sam's credit, in Illinois, we backed the increase of the minimum wage years ago, but as long as we keep the tip credit, and I think exactly dreams about the tip credit, like we have to always protect the tip credit, and we'll do so. And any other like pragmatic, solutions we are on board for, and our partners of the National Restaurant Association are on board for. Aaron, did you have any other, or Michael, any other closing sentiments that you want everyone to be aware of in 2023?
Tracking all the federal rules, from independent contractors to joint employer to, the federal rulemaking apparatus is going out. We love to have examples, collaboration, but just for you to be aware of it, We have new tools like the policy primer that is going to be dedicated to share like the rulemaking calendar with folks. And we want to get innovative about that because we know that you have maybe 5 to 15 minutes a week to look at the stuff that we do. We want to make it as impactful and digestible as possible. So I'll just end with thank you very much. At the end of every year, share gratitude. I'm so grateful for our members and to be working on behalf of this organization.
And Sam, if I can just dovetail on what Aaron said, and I apologize, I'm now standing by my window so I can get better feed. Members in Springfield have viewed our administrative rule process as an alternate way to accomplish their goals without having to sponsor a bill themselves. In Illinois, again, not trying to put people to sleep on this, the only way you can propose administrative rules is if a state department does so themselves. There is no filing of a rule by Representative Smith or Senator Johnson. The State Department themselves have to propose it. So it's a very arcane and delicate process that very, very few people follow. Newer members have viewed our JCAR process, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, as an alternate way to attempt to accomplish the goal if the straight up traditional legislative play has not worked. I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more of that, particularly when it comes to labor issues and employment issues, for no other reason than the size of the Democratic majority in the House and the Senate. Much more leeway, much more play, even though JCAR is evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats.
Good to know.
Okay, point.
Yeah,
Well,
but, I'll just echo what Aaron was saying about the how much we value you all as partners. I think this is going to be a very, very busy 2023 at the state and local level, even if there is some gridlock in Congress. I think we're going to see a lot of FAST Act, tip credit, bread and butter labor issues pop up, but also a lot of the new emerging issues that were covered on that slide. And so a lot of states are going to be dealing with this for the first time, but I think in Illinois we've built a groundwork over the past couple of years that will serve us well. So looking forward to an exciting and challenging year, and hope to join again this time next year to talk about some of the victories we've had.
I agree. Yeah, we should do this again next year. And on that note, I just want to thank everyone for joining today and remind everyone that as an attendee, you will get this entire recording as well as the slide deck after the conclusion of this webinar. And please make sure to stay engaged in the IRA and the National Restaurant Association. Sign up for our newsletters if you haven't already. We're here to help, and it's important that we are able to continue to do this work and become a member and get our advocacy alerts and stay up to date on everything that's affecting you. I want to also personally thank our fearless leader, Sam Toya. Couldn't do anything here without his incredible understanding and relationships and constant advocacy on all fronts, and Michael Ambrose from the National Restaurant Association, Aaron Frazier from the National Restaurant Association, and Derek Blada, our fearless leader in Springfield, on behalf of the IRA. So thank you, everyone.
And we thank you, Kara, but we can't do this without all you members. It's all about teamwork. It's not about me or Derek or Kara or Michael or Aaron. It's all about you guys. It's all about teamwork. So thank you for being part of the team, because we could not do what we do day in and day out without you being there for us. So thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day and happy holidays.
Thank you.